Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 475, and today's date is September 24th, 2014, and the title of this episode is Boots on the Ground, Armies Deploying Division Headquarters to Iraq. And once again, what have we seen? Well, we've seen the Obama administration say absolutely no boots on the ground. They sent in military advisors completely equipped to battle because they are Marines, and we can see right now we have been seeing mission creep. 475 advisors, 500 advisors, and now all of a sudden we're starting to see more and more troops enter Iraq, and now the Army is deploying a division headquarters, which means something big is going down here, and we know exactly what it is. It's going to be a full-out war within this whole entire region and then spreading out. And again, this will start World War III, and we can see they are continually bombing inside Syria, again, violating international law, violating the Constitution. Congress is just sitting there and is doing absolutely nothing, because what do we recognize here is that Congress left for their campaigning. All of a sudden, as soon as they leave, that's when the president decides to bomb Syria. The same thing happened when Congress went on vacation in August. If you remember, they went on vacation. All of a sudden, we had the Islamic State move into the entire region. All of a sudden, we had bombing in Iraq. So we can see the president definitely has a trend here. He waits until Congress leaves the area and then goes ahead and does whatever he does here, and which is pretty much against the Constitution, against the UN Charter, against international law. Many of the countries are calling him out on this, and the message to the rest of the world is really those countries who said, we are not going to go along with this, and that was UK, France, Germany, and Australia. Yes, they will go into Iraq because Iraq said, please help us. We do not want boots on the ground. We just want air support. And most of these countries said that is fine, but we are not going into Syria because we are not breaking international law. Now let's get into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand Europe is having a major problem. We understand it's spreading to Australia, it's spreading to Canada. They're starting to manipulate some of their data, but it's very interesting. Out of Australia, we realize that they're having a type of a housing boom there also. But the Australian Central Bank is stepping up their warnings on mortgage lending. Australia's central bank said additional steps might be taken to tighten banks' lending practices as it warned the housing market was becoming unbalanced with investor activity outstripping those homeowners and businesses. So we can see right now we are seeing that either there are a lot of speculators, flippers going into the housing market and pumping it up. Again, back when the United States had its housing crisis in 2008, we saw many of the countries, their housing markets completely came down also, and we are definitely seeing the same thing happen. Now here in the States, we are seeing that the United States is the leader in low-wage paying jobs. They have about 25% compared to all the other countries. Ireland has about 22%, Canada coming in at 22%, United Kingdom coming in at 21%, Denmark coming in at 19%, and it goes down the list here. So we can see why all the illegals are coming in. They need these people to fill the low-wage jobs, put them on Obamacare, and this is exactly what is happening. Now, the people of the United States do not want the illegals just to come over the border. They want them to go through the proper channels to become a citizen of the United States, but the corporations of America definitely do not want this whatsoever. Now, in the corporate media today, we heard some great news. New home sales explode higher than ever before, and everything looks fantastic. But when we really look at this picture, what do we know? Well, new homes just don't pop up overnight, and this is going back in August. This is when the data is. They had to make arrangements and start their contracting and their building way back about 5 to 8 months, some houses a little bit longer. So this happened during the peak of the bubble. going forward. And now we are here in August, and we're seeing these new homes come online. Now, of course, while this is happening, what are we seeing? Well, we are seeing that the revenues of KB Homes was smaller than expected, even though we're having this huge new home explosion here. And of course, this is just a backlog of everything that was done prior to this. As we go forward, what are we going to see? Well, all of a sudden, you're going to see these new homes completely drop off. They might have one more month of good thumbs up, exploding, and then it's going to start to slowly come down and fade away. Because again, this was done at the height of the market. But while all this is going on, what do we see? Once again, mortgage applications. They have dipped again by 4.1% the week ending September 19th. We're also seeing refinancing applications falling by 7%, while the gauge of loan requests for home purchases, a leading indicator of home sales, dipped once again by 0.3%. So we're looking at this entire situation. We're seeing multifamily homes pretty much imploding on themselves, existing home sales coming down, prices are leveling off in many areas. They're starting to really drop. And we're seeing this backlog of new home sales, which are just hitting the market right now. And of course, what we're seeing is something that is going to completely disappear as we move into the fall. This will completely fade away, and we will not see this occur once again. Now, a lot of people are thinking that the market is still rising, and again, all these people do come in at this point in time, and we're starting to see that we're hitting the top of the bubble, and we're going to start coming down as we move through the fall and winter. Now, the Cleveland Fed head is out there, and pretty much she is using the C word, and this is very scary because we've heard this once before back in 2007 going into 2008. This is Cleveland Fed head Loretta Mester. She says that the financial stability risks in U.S. are well contained right now. Now, we heard this back in 2008 from Bernanke, where he says the subprime is contained, real estate is contained, Bear Stearns is contained, and what we're seeing right now, they're starting to use these same exact words, and we heard them all before, and we know once they start using these words, none of this is contained. This means we're heading down to a complete collapse of the system. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, was out there saying that China's economy will likely grow faster in 2015 than previously estimated. The global lender says the country's growth will likely be well above 7% next year compared to the private Western Central Bank countries, which are much, much, much lower. Now, we understand that the airstrikes are continuing in Syria, and of course they're using the propaganda that they're going after the Islamic State, and all of a sudden we're seeing warnings now come out, and we're seeing that the FBI, DHS, they're completely out there saying that everyone needs to be on full militarized alert. They have a couple bulletins that came out. U.S. security officials warned federal and local police to watch for homegrown violent extremists who may be motivated to attack by airstrikes in Syria. In the second bulletin, the FBI and DHS assesses that disgruntled and former employees pose a significant threat to U.S. businesses due to their authorized access to sensitive information and the networks business rely on. So we can see, and looks like it was ginned up by the UPS shooting in Birmingham, Alabama, and we're also seeing the warnings that there are homegrown extremists running around the country, and they're all hot and bothered by these strikes in Syria. Now, I'm talking to a lot of people here, and I am not seeing what DHS and FBI are talking about all these homegrown extremists, how they're so upset about what's going on in Syria. Most of these people have no idea what is going on whatsoever. They're too busy watching Dancing with the Stars, Voice, or any other type of show that is out there, and they're really not interested in what's going on the other part or other side of the world, except those people who want to be really tuned in, who really understand what's going on, and those are the people that are mostly listening and reading things from the alternative media or the independent media, and they really want to know what is really going on across the nation and across the world, I should say. And the DHS and FBI are using this to convince everyone when the domestic terrorists start to rise up, when the collapse happens, they want everyone to realize, these are the extremists, these are the people that you should be afraid of. And they're just taking this out of thin air to create this fear among the American people. Now, it looks like in the case of Ebola, U.S. is authorizing Canadian Ebola treatment developed under a military contract. Tecmera says its TKM Ebola treatment has been administered to patients on emergency basis. Canadian drug maker Tecmera Pharmaceuticals Corp. said on Monday that U.S. and Canadian regulators have authorized the use of its Ebola treatment in patients who have confirmed or suspected infections from the deadly virus. Now, of course, Tecmera works with the U.S. government. The company is developing the TKM Ebola under a contract with the U.S. Department of Defense. Now, what's very interesting about this is that Russia is out there, and they're saying there's absolutely no vaccine out there as of yet. They're saying they've tested all of them, and none of them show any type of an effect on Ebola, one way or the other. And they're saying that the world community right now has no vaccine. Even though they're injecting people with these vaccines, they're saying these really don't do anything at this point in time. Now, of course, they injected many different people. Some recovered, some did not, and this is not a very good track record. Now, it looks like in Liberia, the World Health Organization has announced a program which will round up Ebola victims across Liberia and herd them into these community care centers, or you can actually call them Ebola death camps, because this is really where they're going to die. And this is not voluntary. They're just going to come and get you and bring you into these areas. And this is a very big worry, because as we know right now, Ebola is confined to West Africa. Right now, it is in those countries that have huge amount of natural resource discoveries, and we understand that China and Russia are in these countries, and it looks like the U.S. government is decimating the economies there, bringing in military soldiers. This does not mean that they will not use the Ebola scare all over the place, because we already see CDC saying that from their computer models, which are absolutely meaningless. But of course, when you play this on the corporate media, people look at this and say, oh my God, they did a computer model, it has to be right. Well, no, it's just a number they plug in there, and they can have a factor of cases, and it just goes up from there, and it's actually meaningless, because whatever you plug in there, that's what you get out. They already did this back in 2009 about the swine flu, and they said in the winter of 2009 we're going to have about 600,000 cases, and if they projected it out, it would reach almost 2 million. But again, the swine flu completely disappeared. Now the question is, was that a test case to see how many people would go and get some type of vaccination or some type of inhaler or anything like this to get rid of it or protect themselves from it? And it's starting to look like they wanted to see how many people would obey what the government wanted them to do. Now we see Ebola really coming out of West Africa, and of course they're saying that it's going to be a ramp up, it's going to be huge, and again, they can use this to scare the American people to get a vaccine. Now, what's in the vaccine, that's a whole different story. Will this actually contain Ebola and actually make the spread make the virus spread to many other people? Well, there is a doctor in Liberia saying this is exactly what happened in his area. As soon as they vaccinated people in that area, all of a sudden there was an Ebola breakout. Now, of course, then they can declare medical martial law, they can have these death camps, and they can bring people. And what we're seeing right now is the first stage of getting everyone to look at the situation and to understand what is going on in West Africa. Now, if this is truly a worldwide phenomenon where Ebola is breaking out, and this could wreak havoc on every single nation, there should be a world government body coming together to fight Ebola. But we're seeing all different countries do things separately. We're not seeing a coordination of all of this. Yes, we do have the World Health Organization, we have the CDC here in America, but we're not really seeing a coordination of all nations coming together and saying, listen, this is a very, very serious situation. We need to stop this. We need to come together before it really does spread across the globe. And this gives me some indication that this is really confined right now to West Africa for a specific agenda. Now, it looks like there are more troops coming into Liberia now. 100 more U.S. military personnel are going to arrive in West Africa by the end of the week, and more will follow. And we have to see the outcome of this entire thing, because as more and more military soldiers move into this area and all of a sudden everything becomes controllable, everything's contained, like in Senegal, Sierra Leone, they're saying that they have really contained what is going on there. Nigeria has said they contained their area, and we'll have to actually keep an eye to see if all of a sudden Guinea has contained it, Liberia is now contained, and of course, as we know, the central bankers have loaned all these West African nations lots of money. They have military soldiers coming in to this area, so the central bankers are pretty much taking over this area. Now, if this whole thing dies down and all of a sudden everything is fine, we know for sure this is exactly what they were doing. Now, in Afghanistan, we do understand that there is a new president. They're waiting for him to sign the bilateral security agreement. But what's very interesting about this is that they will not allow anyone to know the vote totals. They're going to keep them a secret because they're afraid of everyone rising up and not liking what the totals are, which is absolutely ridiculous, which shows something is not right in Afghanistan. It seems like they're covering up who really won the elections. They don't want to let it out, and of course the United States central bankers want their man in there, and they want him to sign the bilateral security agreement so we can keep troops in Afghanistan and keep operations continuing in this area. Now, it looks like under the ceasefire deal with Ukraine, that Russia kind of brokered the whole entire thing. Japan decided to impose sanctions on Russia, which actually makes no sense whatsoever. Since there's peace right now, a ceasefire agreement, why would you impose sanctions at this point in time? It makes no sense whatsoever, except if they want to continually provoke Russia, and this is exactly what is going on. Now, what's very interesting also in Ukraine right now, it looks like Ukraine is not pulling out its large caliber weapons from positions in the east of the country. They're waiting for the militias to do theirs first, to pull back a little bit. And the militias are out there, and this is the southeastern section of Ukraine. They are saying that we have been pulling back our weapons as required by the Minsk Memorandum, but we're noticing the Ukrainian army has not pulled back whatsoever. And we've seen this once before when Poroshenko had a ceasefire, and he said, listen, lay down your weapons, pull back your troops, we'll arrest you, and this will be peace. And we're seeing the same thing happen here. The southeastern people have pulled back a lot of their equipment. Ukraine army is steadfast, staying where they are, not moving at all. Now, Russia is calling for an international probe into Ukraine burials with signs of execution. Russia is calling for an international investigation into the discovery of burial sites with signs of execution at location where the Ukraine National Guard forces were stationed 2 days earlier. The head of Russia's Presidential Human Rights Council said that he has called on the authorities to do everything to ensure an independent international probe and let international human rights activists and journalists gain access to the site in eastern Ukraine. They found a couple of bodies. Their hands were tied behind their back. 3 of them were women, and they were decapitated. And this kind of fits into all the paid mercenaries, because we see the Free Syrian Army, the Islamic State, and we've seen many, many videos of these paid mercenaries where they're ripping hearts out of the Syrian soldiers, where they're decapitating people. And I'm not talking about those fake videos from the Islamic State, which we don't even know if they're really from them. I'm talking about the real videos where you actually see a soldier on the ground in the battlefield, reaching in, grabbing the heart, and ripping it out. And we're seeing the same thing happen here. All these paid mercenaries, which are paid for by the United States, UK, Israel, all do the same things. We saw it happen in Ukraine. We're seeing it happen in Syria. It's all over the place. There's no difference among them whatsoever. Now, Obama is out there, and it seems like he's trying to take credit for this ceasefire in Ukraine. Obama said on Wednesday that the country would lift the sanctions imposed on Russia if they choose a peaceful course in Ukraine. Wait a minute. Russia proposed a ceasefire deal. He spoke to Poroshenko. Poroshenko went along with it. They talked to the southeastern people. Obama had nothing to do with this whatsoever. They never talked about peace. They never came in there and said, let's have a dialogue. Obama said on Wednesday that, there's a different path that is available. It is the path of diplomacy and peace. The recent ceasefire agreement in Ukraine offers this path to Russia to do the right thing. Now, wait a minute. This whole thing was not Obama's idea. It wasn't the U.S. government's idea. They were calling on more and more war. They weren't looking for a ceasefire. They never even mentioned a ceasefire. They never mentioned a dialogue. They never put forth a plan for a peaceful negotiation between the two parties. They did nothing of the sort. But he is taking credit once again. He also took credit for the chemical weapons removal in Syria, when this again had nothing to do with him. He didn't call for that. He brought in the ships, and Russia went out and said, listen, we will broker this deal if Assad removes his chemical weapons. Is this all you require? And the Obama administration said, absolutely yes, this is all we need. But we knew back then this was all fake, phony, and false. They had no support to go in there, and this is why they had to take that option. And this is why 1 year later, the United States government is back where they started, going into Syria, and their goal is always the same, to get Assad. Now, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, President Obama, is going to spend about $1 trillion to revitalize the aging nuclear arsenal. Of course, they're building up the military assets because they understand as time goes on, we're going to get into World War III. Actually, we're really already into it. We're fighting all over the place right now. We just haven't had the big explosion to say, ooh, we're in World War III. But all the nations are actually prepping for this. We can see them all moving military assets. They're getting ready, and they're really pushing their agenda for war. And China and Russia, they understand and they know that it's coming. And this is why they're making preparations on their side. But if you notice, they're continually trying to simmer down what is going on here, and each time the central bankers come out, they throw another gallon of gas on the flame to push war back up, and they continually have to pat it down to try to smolder it out, and eventually what's going to happen is there's going to be a big type of explosion, and it will start World War III, and everyone will look at it and they'll say, wow, what just happened here? Where did this come from? Now, it looks like there's one more offensive going on in Libya. We understand that the tribes have captured the Libyan capital, and it looks like from inside of the country, from the government there, they're trying to push out these tribes and trying to retake the capital. Will it work? Most likely not. And we have seen these mysterious strikes inside of Libya, and they really haven't helped because the people all around there have risen up. They created a government, they created a parliament, and they pushed the puppet regime completely out of Libya. Now, like I said in the beginning of this report, the Army is preparing to deploy a division headquarters to Iraq. An official announcement is expected in the coming days, but Army Chief of Staff General Ray Ordonero recently confirmed the Army will send another division headquarters to Iraq to control what we're doing there. It's unclear how many soldiers will be sent or how long they will deploy. Division headquarters average between 100 and 500 soldiers and deploy for 1 year. The division headquarters deploying to Iraq is is expected to be responsible for coordinating the efforts of the 1,600 troops President Obama has sent to Iraq already. So we can see right now, actually it's more than that, but that's what this says here. Actually, what's happening is they're completely doing what's called a mission creep, bringing in soldiers very, very slowly, putting boots on the ground. And what we're seeing is that the government officials right now completely lied when they said no boots on the ground. We're going to see boots on the ground in Syria. We're going to see boots on the ground everywhere because they are trying to gin up war. This is their entire plan. Now, Russia is out there, and they're saying that the United States did not tell them anything about the airstrikes in Syria. They were not notified, but they are well aware of our position, and Russia is saying this to the U.S. What they think this is completely counter to all norms and principles of international law and the UN Charter. We always said and keep saying this, and they will never stop, because it is. And if you look around, most of the nations are looking at this, and this is why those other countries backed out, because they realized this is against international law. They had no right to go in there. Syria did not strike any of these countries. The Islamic State did not strike at any of these countries, and they had no right to go in there whatsoever. Now, what's happening here, it seems like these countries that are surrounding the area and other private Western central bank countries, they seem like they are getting ready for something to go full steam ahead here. Turkish government will ask for the parliament's authorization for military operations in Syria and Iraq. The proposal will be submitted to the Turkish parliament after the new legislative year starts on October 2nd. So it looks like they're trying to put forth that they want to join in to this and be ready for it. Now also, the UK Parliament is looking to be recalled to endorse a UK airstrike in Iraq. Opposition leader Ed Miliband has told the PM, "We will support UK involvement in Iraq, but not in Syria." Parliament is to be recalled on Friday to endorse British airstrikes in Iraq following assurances from the leader of the opposition that they will not go back into Syria. Now, of course, if Syria would strike the United States or one of the Arab nation planes that are flying inside Syria, then all of a sudden you'll see everything completely change, and all of a sudden the UK, France, Australia, Germany will eventually join in. Or if there is some type of terrorist attack in the United States, in UK, in Germany, or any of the other countries, all of a sudden we will see then, yes, we were struck, they attacked us, we are ready to fight. Wherever the Islamic State is, that's where they're going. Now the U.S. is out there, and they're trying to pretty much use legalese to explain why they're inside Syria. Lawyers use Iraq's right of self-defense, a weakness of Syrian regime, which U.S. has undermined, to justify failure to seek UN approval. U.S. government lawyers have invoked Iraq's right to self-defense and the weakness of Assad's regime as twin justifications for the U.S. bombing in Syria, which makes absolutely no sense. I mean, yes, Iraq has its right to self-defense inside its country. That doesn't give the right of the U.S. to fly into Syria. U.S. Ambassador Samantha Power argued that the threat to Iraq from the Islamic State, known as ISIS, gave the U.S. and its allies in the region an automatic right to attack on its behalf. No, it doesn't. You need a UN vote on this from the UN Security Council. You need the Congress to vote on this, or it has to be with the Wars Power Act, and the United States was never attacked. So you cannot go in there on the behalf of Iraq saying, "Hey, can you please attack this nation?" You can obliterate the Islamic State inside of Iraq, but that's about it. And you can see they're just skirting around the issue, trying to figure out a way to explain what they have done. The government of Iraq has asked the United States to lead an international effort to strike the Islamic State sites and military strongholds in Syria in order to end the continuing attacks on Iraq, to protect Iraqi citizens, and ultimately to enable and arm Iraqi forces to perform their tasks of regaining control of the Iraqi borders. Well, another country cannot ask you to attack another country. That is absolutely ridiculous. It makes no sense whatsoever. It's like Mexico asking Russia, "Hey, can you attack the United States for us?" No, it just can't happen. And they're just skirting around the issue because they know they're wrong. This is a war crime. They went into a sovereign nation. They did not get permission from Assad, from the Syrian government. White House has avoided seeking a fresh authorization of the use of military force, preferring to rely on early authorizations against al-Qaeda granted after the September 11, 2001 attack. But this means arguing that the Islamic State is equivalent to al-Qaeda, even though the groups are split logic that several critics in Congress, such as Virginia Senator Tim Kaine, have argued is flawed and requires a fresh authorization to fix this. Yes, the authorization back in 2001 was to get al-Qaeda. That is it. The Islamic State is not al-Qaeda. They're separate and apart. That's what they kept telling us. So this whole thing is completely falling apart. And again, once they use the authorization during that time in 2001, it's used up. It just doesn't keep going forever and ever. And they're having a huge, huge problem trying to explain how they got into Syria. And they're trying to skirt around the law. But of course, us as the American people, we have to follow their laws. And it looks like the U.S. has dropped a month of bombs on Syria in one night. So basically what has happened is they went in there and they used more bombs on Syria in one night than they did in Iraq when they were bombing Iraq. Now, the Syrian refugees that are escaping into Turkey are criticizing the U.S. airstrikes against ISIS. Refugees in Turkish border town expect more to flee to Syria if the U.S. continues bombing campaign. Before its neighbors were the Islamic State, they're saying they were the Free Syrian Army, and then they went to be the Islamic State. So we can see right now all they're doing is changing their flags. It's the same exact group. They're just changing their flags back and forth. They said the Free Syrian Army / the Islamic State used to just go around the streets and firing their guns, and we can see that this is definitely the same exact group whatsoever. This person called Ismail says his relatives have been reporting several civilian casualties and that people around the bombing sites have fled into Raqqa countryside, but sooner or later they will come to Turkey if this continually goes on. So they're hitting civilians, they're hitting many different other things. They're not hitting the Islamic State. Ralph Peters, Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, was out there saying these strikes last night were designed to limit terrorist casualties. These were not serious, manful strikes. The airstrikes led by the United States were launched late Monday night and hit buildings in Syria where the Islamic State has command and control centers. The Pentagon said it did not target people. It just hit the buildings and their command centers. They were completely empty. And he is saying this is a ridiculous strategy. Why didn't we fly in during the day to actually hit the Islamic State? So we can see right now they've been hitting empty buildings, empty targets, actually killing the people who live in this town. And who knows, maybe they destroyed the air base that is in Raqqa, because again, if they clear out this area, the Syrian army could come in and use this air base, and it seems like they might be taking out strategic military targets like the air base, so the Syrian army could not use this in the future and have the Free Syrian Army pretty much take over this area. Now, the Syrian opposition is out there, and they're saying, you know, why are you bombing these buildings and all these other areas? You need to go and bomb Assad. Go right to the heart of the situation. Forget about all of this. Now, of course, this would be ridiculous for the United States to do at this point in time, because then the world would know that, oh wait, they're not going after the Islamic State, they're actually going after Assad. So they have to make it look good. They're just dropping a lot of bombs, pretending to hit the Islamic State, hitting a lot of different areas, just like they've been doing in Iraq. Now, it seems this new group, the Khorasan group, which is al-Qaeda linked, and now it seems like they're linking this to Iran. Now, like I said, Khorasan is a region in North Iran. There's a northern and southern section called Northern Khorasan and Southern Khorasan, and right now it seems like they're starting to say that this group might have cooperation with the Iranian regime. So we can see where this is starting to head. They want to include Iran in there, and as we know, there are some Revolutionary Guards that are fighting inside of Syria, some forces of Iran helping the Syrian government, and I'm very curious, is this what the United States is actually going after? Other type of groups and the help from other places like Iran, and not hitting the Islamic State whatsoever. Now, of course, we've seen a new beheading today, where a split off of the Islamic State called the Caliphate decapitated a British journalist. Once again, just like all the others. Wasn't really a video that I could find out there, but I'll continue searching. If somebody has a link to the actual video, please send it to me, and I'll just continue to look for it today. I've seen pictures of it, but they're blurry and very hard to make out what is going on there. Now, the Islamic State put out a video of the British hostage John within hours of the airstrike in Syria, and they're saying that the United States is embarking on a Gulf War III now, and this is really World War III. And we could see that all of this is being pushed. Obama is out there, other Pentagon officials are out there. They are saying this is not going to be over for many, many years. They're getting everyone ready for World War III. They want you to know that we're going to be in war for a very, very long time. Now, Peter King is out there, and like I said, as soon as we went into Syria, we're going to have corporate media, government officials all out there pushing the fear-mongering propaganda that the Islamic State is going to be attacking here in the United States, or it could be Khorasan, because, you know, they wanted to really do a 9/11 here in the United States. And of course, don't worry, the United States stopped them from doing this, which is absolutely ridiculous. Peter King is out there saying intensifying U.S. airstrikes against the Islamic State could provoke members of the terror group already on U.S. soil to stage attacks here. And he's saying most of them are probably ready to go. They're just waiting for the right time. And again, if or when this does occur, this is going to be a false flag event. This is going to be from our government officials to convince you that the Islamic State came over here, created this terror. They might link it to Syria and Iran at this point to try to get us into war. Now, of course, they're continually bombing in Syria. They're hoping to provoke Syria into doing something. We saw Israel shoot down a Syrian plane while the Arab nations and the United States were going after the Islamic State, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. And now it's coming out that the Syrian plane really wasn't in Israel's territory whatsoever. So we can see, again, provoke, 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 and it's not working. I'm sure Assad is talking to Putin, and they're saying, just don't do anything, sit back. Let's see where they're doing with this. Let's see their strategy, what they're trying to accomplish. And again, they might be taking out many different airfields, so the Syrian army cannot get to them. And this way they can bring in more air power to the area. And we can see right now this whole thing is going very, very hot, and it's going to continually go on as time goes on. Now, of course, they're doing many different little runs inside Syria. They need some type of an event to really get all the nations in on this to take out Assad. And eventually this will bring in Iran, this will bring in Russia, then China, and then we will be into the main World War III. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.